Hi, I'm Sister Simone Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of Network and leader of Nuns on the Bus, my favorite title. And tonight, the night before the election, the night before the final votes are cast, and we begin the counting, we're going to watch again this town hall, the closing town hall from Nuns on the Bus. I'm going to be making some comments in chat. Staff are going to be doing likewise. So if you want to enter in, ask questions, let's get a dialogue going because it's so important that we be together tonight. It's been a long journey. You might have noticed that. It's been very long. We've been on this road for a very long time. But tonight, we come together because we know community is what matters. So this town hall was fabulous, and I didn't get to fully enjoy it the first time. So this is going to be great. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Sister Simone Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of Network, Lobby for Catholic Social Justice, and leader of Nuns on the Bus. And I'm so glad you've joined us tonight. This is our very last event of our virtual bus trip. Who we elect matters. We know that is so true in this election cycle. Well, a brief summary of what have we been doing? Well, we've been on the virtual highway for 30 days. We've held 63 events, 5 rallies, 28 town halls, 25 site visits, and 5 dialogues across geographic divides, which has been one of my favorites. Well, at these town halls every evening, we've gathered over 1,300 people total to have actual conversations about being multi-issue voters, about how do we talk about a faith that does justice. So tonight, that's what we get to explore together with our fabulous guests. But before we do, let's do a little communal building because it's critical in this time. We cannot do this work of justice building unless we're community. We've got to be together. So you might want to put in the chat or the comments section where you're coming from. Where are you watching us from? Because the miracle of technology in this socially distanced time is that we can be together from all over the country. It gives me joy. It's not quite the same as being able to touch and hug, but it does let us know we're not alone. Now, also, at our town halls, we've also started every town hall with a buzz question. So I'm just going to ask you, we can't pair off this time, but just think about the answer. What would your answer be? And the buzz question has been, who in your family is it difficult to talk to about politics and why? And then we would be zoomed off and we would just have a couple of minutes to talk to one other person that we hadn't known before to build the little community. So think about your answer. And I just understand we have like over 160 people on the video right now. So okay, let's get close. Let's connect with each other. Well, I had at the town halls, I was saying that my answer to that question until 2018 was always my brother. My brother was always the challenge. And you know how that goes. But then in 2018, we were on the bus on our road to Mar-a-Lago on the tax justice tour. And I did some video that went viral on Facebook. And I understand from my sister that several of his Facebook friends sort of attacked me. But the amazing thing was that my brother stood up for me. My brother stood up for me, and I will never forget this. The thing that he wrote ended with, "So I'm standing up for my friend and my sister." Well, I have to say it brought tears to my eyes. It made me realize that love is underneath it all. Love is stronger than the political lightning bolts that we sometimes throw at each other. It didn't change the lightning bolts, but it changed my feeling about it, my knowledge that we're connected in love. And that love is what will see us through. And probably the political thing is more about the fact I'm the oldest, he's the youngest. There's political dynamics. In our family, there were 3 girls. He was the one boy. You could read a lot into all that. But to know that he stood up for me, wow, That was sacred. That was sacred to me, and it opened my heart to the little conflicts more as endearing realities. But before my heart was open, I created in my head this idea that we could get along much better at big holiday meals if we created a lending library of difficult relatives. What if we could each put a difficult relative in the lending library? I'd check out your difficult relative and you could check out mine. And I bet we would do a lot better with somebody who wasn't our own relative. But then I realized, well, my brother would probably put me in the lending library and wasn't sure how it would all work out. So I gave up that idea. And I'm holding on to this idea that love underneath it is more powerful than the political division. So, bold people that we are, let's engage in what is happening in our nation at this time. Let us begin a town hall, unlike any other town hall we've held on the bus trip. So we have amazing guests, and I'm so excited. I can hardly stand it. So, first of all, we're going to, Network usually talks about economic justice and inequality, structural racism, all the structural economic issues. Tonight, because we know we're multi-issue voters, we're opening up beyond what Network usually does. And that's the important thing of this, to know that we're going to talk about equally sacred priorities. So, our first guest, which just makes me so excited, is Sister Helen Prejean, a sister of St. Joseph, famous all over the world, my hero for her work on the death penalty, her books that are so stirring and has some humorous pieces to it, Dead Man Walking, Death of Innocence, River of Fire. And the other piece I have to say that just delights my heart is that she wrote the foreword to my book. It's the most enthusiastic piece of the whole thing. It was fabulous. So I admire her persistence, her joy, her passion, and Pope Francis calls those signs of holiness. So let's us welcome Sister Helen Prejean. Sister Helen, you're so welcome to our stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here, Simone. I mean, nuns on the bus and getting to people. People are the country. People are the church. People are the gospel. It's us. You know my best definition of justice? It's just us. It's people who get together and realize, wait a minute, this is wrong. We got to change this. So I want to bring you into the special place that I've been inhabiting for these 30 years by getting involved with the death penalty, by going into prisons and onto death rows, and to realize this whole prison scene, that you cannot, there's a fourth city in the United States. The population of this fourth largest city is very hard to visit because it's all the people in prison. The number of people in prison in the United States, we're the largest incarcerator in the world, is as large as the fourth largest city. It's a place of exile. It's a place of punishment. It's a place of separating people from their parents, from their families. And it's a place calling to be transformed, the gospel of Jesus, to restorative justice, and not just dehumanizing people and punishing them and identifying them with the worst act of their life. Who we elect matters. I right now was just last week contacted by the lawyers of a man by the name of Brandon Bernard. He was just selected by Attorney General William Barr to be next on the list to be executed under his watch. The big fallacy and problem with the death penalty is it's up to the discretion of prosecutors, because we don't have a criteria that holds for everybody. It's got to be up to the discretionary power of prosecutors. So here on federal death row, for 17 years, we didn't have an execution. And now under Attorney General Barr, under, I'm sure, orders from the White House and President Trump, They decided in July that they were going to start killing people. And they've been doing it. They have killed 7 people. So here these lawyers for Brandon Bernard contact me last week and tell me suddenly their client, guards came to his cell, put handcuffs on him, took him across over to a holding cell where the warden was waiting, read to him a document out of the blue that he's going to be killed on December 10th. We need a change in the White House. We need a change in the Attorney General. We need a change in immigration policies in this country and the way human beings are treated. We need a change to say we're pro-life and not to be engaged in every one of these issues, including the huge numbers of human beings that we have sent into exile and punishment in our prisons, is just to put our head in the sand and only be so myopic in our view of what pro-life means. For these 30 years, I've also been in dialogue with our church. And I said when I had occasion to have direct dialogue with Pope John Paul, Your Holiness, does the church, Catholic Church, only uphold the innocence, the dignity of innocent life? I hear Catholics saying they're pro-life, and they say they're against abortion, but they for the death penalty. When I'm walking with a man to execution, and he's shackled hand and foot, and he turns around to me as we're beginning to walk, and he says, Sister, please pray God holds up my legs. Your Holiness, where is the dignity in taking a human being and rendering them defenseless and then killing them? We have a way to keep society safe without imitating the most terrible behavior and doing to them what they did to their victim, killing them. Can you help our church? And he did. And now Pope Francis, in the latest encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, 6 paragraphs on why the government can never be entrusted with the power to kill. So when we look at pro-life and when we look at electing leaders, I definitely know how I'm voting. And I'm looking at all the death that has come across this country by not dealing with the COVID thing and letting people die, especially people of color. I have friends on the Northern Cheyenne and the Crow Reservation, and they're dying in droves because they don't have health care. And without leadership that cares about the life of all the people, the common good of all the people, health care for all the people, we have people dying in droves, and we cannot just turn our heads the other way. I think this election is so important that we truly vote on the side of life. Life in every way. Poor kids that don't have health care. People going hungry. And I love what Network is doing. And I love that I get to be on this bus, virtual or not, and be part of this town meeting. The way our society changes, the way we grow, is when we meet with each other and we say, let me tell you what happened to me, and let me tell you about my neighbor, and I've seen the suffering, and what are we going to do about it? And that's what this is about tonight. So thank you for letting me be part of this.
Oh my gosh.
You, Simone, back to you.
Oh, Helen, thank you so much. Oh, the fact that the 4th largest city is the incarcerated.
Exactly.
That's sticking with me. And the pro-life stance that Attorney General Barr is allegedly a good Catholic, and he's choosing to kill. It breaks my heart. We need change. Who we elect matters. You're absolutely right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but we'll have this conversation after we get everybody else in. So I am really honored to have Melissa Cedillo with us today. She is a graduate student at Harvard Divinity School, which is pretty impressive. But I'll tell you, the part that impresses me most is that she stays engaged in public policy and has done some amazing writing, most recently in National Catholic Reporter. You may have read some of her blogs. She is passionate about progressive politics and religion, the intersection, the thing that makes my heart happy. So let's welcome Melissa Cedillo. Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me, Sister Simone, and thank you so much for putting on this wonderful event. I think it's really important to talk about multi-issue voting. So often at the national narrative, there's this assumption that religious voters vote on one thing in one way, and events like this really disrupt that idea. For me to understand why I'm a multi-issue voter, I have to bring up two things, one of which is that I attended a Jesuit high school where I learned about the idea of spiritual discernment and finding God in all things. I bring this up because as someone who studies theology, the thing I struggle with is what happens when it seems that God is not present in something, and how does this relate to sin, especially when we get into the nitty-gritty of God is always there, God is always present, and what that means for sin. I bring this up because it's important to understand how I understand public policy and political issues. The second point about my high school is I had a teacher who once framed a class discussion around immigration, asking the question, who would Jesus deport? And there was a silence and a stillness around the classroom because none of us could decide that, right? None of us had the, I think, audacity to speak out loud of who and what Jesus would do around deportation. And I bring this all up because an issue that really persuades and leads on how I vote is immigration. I think immigration is complex and it's messy, but the Catholic perspective reminds us to keep it human, to focus on the humans, and to protect the dignity and life of humans. So while it can get so nitty-gritty in the policy, I think the Catholic teaching really allows us to stay focused on the person, and that more than anything is what needs to guide how we vote. So in the vein of who we elect matters, similar to Sister Simone, I already know who I'm voting for. I've already casted my my vote, and some things that have really helped me in this discernment process of voting is that while both parties have played a role in deportation and anti-immigrant policies, Trump has been particularly bad for immigrants. Not only did he run on anti-immigrant rhetoric, he has also enforced a zero-tolerance policy and the Remain in Mexico policy, which has dismantled the right to seek asylum at the southern Mexico border. No other US president has done this before, and this is particularly bad for children and for humans. I think on top of that, in the last 4 years, we've seen some deeply disturbing headlines come out about ICE. ICE being accused of systematic sexual assault, and then when women come forward, being deported. Most recently, enforced sterilizations, inadequate protection during COVID, high results of death, poor health, and the number of immigrant miscarriages in ICE detention centers has also risen during Trump. These may seem like quick bullet points, but to sit just with it, even one of those, especially through the Catholic lens, is deeply, deeply disturbing. And we have to speak up. We have to remember, like Sister Simone, even if, Sister Helen Prejean said, even if these people aren't visibly noticeable, they still count, even in their detention centers. So, aside from being wrong, this isn't just Catholic. In 2011, the bishops published something about the way that ICE needs to treat immigrants humanely. They need to keep families together. And most recently, yesterday, or no, I guess Wednesday at this point, the weeks are long in 2020, Pope Francis called the Trump administration policy of separating children at the border cruelty of the highest form. As Catholics in the US and in America, we should be concerned that the Pope is calling out the president of this country and the way that we are treating immigrants. It's not okay, it's not right, and it's something that completely shapes on how I vote and what I stand for. I think if our Catholic leaders are openly condemning public instances of mortal sin, then they must openly declare what is happening at these detention centers as evil. And it's not just a place, focused on public safety, which is, I think, what DHS, ICE, and Border Patrol get labeled as, but it's a place that's very complicit in sin. And so I bring all of those points together to say that, yeah, like who we elect matters. What's happened in the last 4 years is a direct correlation of an election that took place in 2016. And who wins in 2 weeks can decide if this is going to get worse, or if we're going to, start to say this is not who we are as a country. And most importantly, this is not who we are as Catholics. Thank you so much for listening. And it's been an honor to speak along so many people who have inspired me in my journey and what it means to be Catholic.
Oh, Melissa, wow. All right. I really appreciate your integration of your faith and your concern about policy, lifting up the issues of life in detention and the policies that are hurting so many of our people and violating international law. That's me, the lawyer, speaking. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay. All right. You've been stirred up. You ready? Okay. Well, one of the things I've been talking about at the town halls, I want to share with you all is how we got started on this. And it actually, being multi-issue voters, it actually got started when I wrote my book, Hunger for Hope. It was published last month by Orbis Press. And as I said, Sister Helen wrote the foreword to it, which was so exciting for me. But what the book tries to do is take a contemplative practice, community, and then applies it to social situations. And as I was reflecting on that, I realized that the political conversation, every election cycle in the United States, always gets the press saying Catholics are single issue voters, and the people on the left, they're not faith people. Well, that isn't my experience. That's not true, but it's the shorthand that's used by the press. And as I prayed about how that came about, what happened, I came to realize that I had committed a social sin. I had committed the social sin of silence back in the 80s when I was practicing law in Oakland, California, working with my family law clients, working with domestic violence situations, custody, child support, all those messy, messy personal things. I didn't want to be identified with the far right that was for the criminalization of abortion. And I didn't want to be identified with the far left, which was the absolute freedom of every woman to choose at any moment. It didn't make sense. They were too extreme. It didn't express the life that I knew. But I committed a sin. I kept my head down. I stayed quiet. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be identified principally with those who were fighting for the criminalization of abortion. I had too many clients who used the services of Planned Parenthood to think that they were just this horrible, toxic, evil, Satan-y organization. That wasn't my experience. But my silence, I realized as I was getting ready to write this book, opened up the whole space. That it gave the whole field for the extremes. And so now I'm trying to atone for my sin of silence and speak out. But I'll have to tell you, I've had to practice this. I did not know how to talk about abortion. I'm a Catholic sister. It's not my issue. But what I came to realize was that the issue, as Pope Francis says in his exhortation on holiness, he calls us to the defense of the unborn, for example, he says. He's just picking something out of the air, I'm sure. Our defense of the unborn, for example, needs to be clear, firm, and passionate. He then goes on to say, equally sacred, however, are the lives of the poor, those already born, the destitute, the abandoned, and the underprivileged, the vulnerable, infirm, and the elderly exposed to covert euthanasia, the victims of human trafficking, new forms of slavery, and every form of rejection. Equally sacred. He then goes on and says, equally sacred is caring for the migrants, the refugees, those seeking asylum, equally sacred. And then this past June, he said in an audience, we cannot tolerate or turn a blind eye to racism and exclusion in any form, and yet claim to defend the sacredness of every human life. Equally sacred. For me, this language became a spur to me to say I had to move beyond my sin of silence and speak of the fullness of my faith, of our faith, of this teaching. But then I prayed about it because, you know, what was really making me mad is that for almost 50 years, we've had this fight about the criminalization of abortion. 50 years. Neither extreme wants to settle it because it's their organizing principle. And as I'm a practical woman, I do politics. I want to get something done. So when I prayed about this call, our defense of the innocent unborn, I pondered, how do I protect the innocent unborn? How do I defend the innocent unborn? And what came to me was, you take care of the pregnant woman. You take care of the mom. You ensure that the mom is in a safe environment. You ensure that the mom has adequate nutrition, has health care. What a radical thought. She should have health care. Has access to stable housing, strong communal support, affordable childcare for when the child is born. Caring for the unborn means caring for the mom. And then I found the statistics. Many of you probably know this, but during Democratic administrations, since Roe v. Wade, during Democratic administrations, the abortion rate's gone down faster in Democratic administrations than it has in Republican administrations. And studies have shown it's because Democrats are more inclined to give supports to pregnant women. And historically, about half of the births in our nation are paid for through Medicaid, through adequately covering medical care, maternity care for pregnant women. Then I got thinking, this is the politician in me, and got thinking about, okay, there's one party who claims to be pro-life, and they believe in the criminalization of abortion. But it's also the same party trying to take health care away from pregnant women. Many people have forgotten that before the Affordable Care Act, being a woman was considered a pre-existing condition. Most health insurance policies did not cover maternity care. You had to pay extra to get maternity care covered. The Affordable Care Act changed that. And now, the party who likes to manipulate us by claiming that they're pro-life, they are trying to take away the Affordable Care Act because of political shenanigans. Well, Sister Helen, I think of what you were talking about the power of an attorney general to make decisions for life or death. This is the power of the court to make decisions for life or death. This is the kind of thing we need to heal. And then, so I'm on this campaign to take care of the moms. I'm also on the campaign to fully embrace all of protecting of life. And among these in here that puzzled me was Pope Francis's listing new forms of slavery. Well, I didn't fully understand that until we were on our virtual bus trip, and we went one of the first days to New Labor, an organization of immigrants up in New Jersey. And these immigrants banded together to protect each other, to ensure that they got paid. They were experiencing their employers withholding their wages, a new form of slavery. And they banded together, and they were so creative. They told about one going to a restaurant before COVID, going to a restaurant where the owner had refused to pay the busboys and the dishwashers. So the group banded together, goes to the restaurant just at the dinner service hour, and starts talking in a fairly loud voice to the owner who was serving as the host, seating people. Well, you can imagine how that went over as all the patrons look. All of a sudden, the man, the owner, decides, oh, that was a mistake. Oh, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Here, let me pay you. I'll pay you right now. And makes a big show of paying. But then these people also found out that many of the businesses in this area, and probably around the nation, have as part of their business plan not paying wages so that they can make a bigger profit? New forms of slavery. And then the other one that really puzzled me from Pope Francis was those exposed to covert euthanasia. I didn't understand that until in the midst of COVID-19. Remember the stories of the nursing homes up in New Jersey and New York City, where there was such rampant attack of the virus, and so many elderly died. The elderly died because the nursing homes did not have adequate funding to be adequately staffed. Principally rely on Medicaid funding, government funding to staff, and they didn't have enough folks. They didn't have enough personal protective equipment. They didn't have enough sanitization processes. They didn't have enough. They disregard for their elderly patients and they died. That is covert euthanasia. Our nation is better than this. We can choose all of life. And so I am a multi-issue voter to lift up the truth that all lives matter. And all lives won't matter until Black lives matter. Black lives won't matter until we wake up to structural racism and all of the horrors that are going around. But we can wake up. We can make a difference. And that's where I come down with who we elect matters. That's it. Got it? Okay, that's my passion. Who we elect matters. And it is choosing life that we need to do and speaking up about it. I'm tired of being corralled by the press, so join me in my one-woman campaign. Let's talk about it. What a radical thought. Got it? Okay. Kind of subversive, but it can make change. All right, now we're going to go to another person that's making change. And this is Father Daniel Horan, who is a professor at the Chicago Theological Union, the Duns Scotus professor, a good Franciscan there. I'm glad to hear it. And he teaches systematic theology, spirituality, has a new book, Catholicity and Emerging Personhood. But he's here today to talk to us about part of pro-life, part of choosing life, part of everything that matters is caring for our earth. So, Father Dan, thanks so much for being with us.
Sister Simone, it's such a joy to be with you. Thank you. And what an honor it is to be a part of this panel and to be a part of the virtual Nuns on a Bus tour. I don't think it's every day that a brother gets to be part of a sister's effort like this. And this solidarity, this really truly is brothers and sisters all, to speak to Pope Francis's latest encyclical. You know, it's probably a bit stereotypical. A lot of folks may be wondering, oh, okay, so we're going to talk about climate. We're going to talk about the environment. We're going to talk about creation. You better get a Franciscan, you know. St. Francis of Assisi loved the animals. He loved the wolf and deer and birds. Oh, bird baths, right? Well, I'm here to say that as true as that may be, we have to move beyond the bird bath, or what I like to call the bird bath industrial complex, which reduces our Catholic faith and St. Francis of Assisi's legacy to just something that is basically a petting zoo. Instead, I think we need to consider how climate change, how creation is essential to our political life and our social life in this country and across the world. You'll hear, as you have, you know, over the weeks and months and what seems like eons during this pandemic era, all the political jockeying and debating about climate change. And it's unique to the United States context that this is such a controversial topic. But I want to say tonight, to reaffirm something that's fundamental to Catholic faith, that climate change is not a Democratic issue. Climate change is not a Republican issue. Climate change is, as Sister Simone indicated, it's a life issue. It's about life. And in three particular ways, climate change should inform and affect our voting practices, how we participate in our society. First and foremost, all the many different life issues that pertain to human persons, to the human family, from conception to death and everything in between. Some of the topics that have already been brought up, as Sister Simone highlighted, so many things that the Holy Father points out are equally sacred. What Sister Helen has advocated tirelessly for in terms of the dignity and value of our incarcerated sisters and brothers, especially those who are subjected to the inhumanity of death row, to those sisters and brothers of ours who are detained unlawfully, criminally, for being migrants, for being refugees, for those seeking a better life, a more dignified life. Each of these and so many more topics all relate to climate. How? Well, let's talk about racism. Racism is tied to this phenomenon called environmental racism. When you think about the disproportionate effect of global climate change, it oftentimes affects those who are the most vulnerable, most oppressed, most poor, those who are most subjected to disenfranchisement in their local communities. And this is so true with our sisters and brothers of color here in the US context. One only has to think of Flint, Michigan, which has been a national story for years about the injustice that's been placed on our sisters and brothers of color, particularly African Americans. People oftentimes in political debates, it's always a heated topic, especially among the Catholic community, about protection for the unborn. But I want to say it's not enough just to advocate for the unborn without talking about what Pope Francis and Pope John Paul II before him advocated for, which is what they call intergenerational justice. What kind of future are we bringing the next generation into? And what we do and what we don't do, what we have failed to do with regard to caring for the rest of creation will impact, again, disproportionately those who will come after us. I think about environmental refugees. Melissa talked so movingly about the experiences and the advocacy that she's promoted on behalf of our detained sisters and brothers at the border. And if we think about why people are seeking new places to live, seeking refuge, seeking safety, one of the things the Holy Father talks about in Laudato Si, and something that the United Nations has talked about as well as President Trump's own national security advisors, is the national security threat that climate change poses, because it impacts so many people and there will be shifts in populations and refugees and migrants. This is a life issue. We can think of the economy, right? With the effects of shifting energy sources and the needs for more and more renewable energy. This will affect the economy, and that's a life issue tied to climate. We can think about the atrocity of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the unnecessary hundreds of thousands of deaths that have resulted. Our sisters and brothers have died, many of them preventably, because a pandemic, because a novel coronavirus spread so rapidly. And scientists tell us that this is going to be par for the course as long as global climate change continues to get worse. We can think of so many other topics. And I believe that global climate change, that creation is a life issue, because every other life, not only our human life and lives, depends on a planet, as Pope Francis says, in which we share one life, in which we share one common home. As St. Francis of Assisi would refer to our planet Earth as our sister and our mother, who provides for us, who cares for us. If you don't think that climate change is a life issue, I invite you right now to take a deep breath and then ask yourself, where did that oxygen come from? It came from the algae in the seas, and it came from trees and grass and plant life. We human beings, me right now, running my mouth, trying to encourage you to be a multi-issue voter, to be a person of faith who puts her faith into action at the ballot box and then beyond. We could not do any of this without the plant life on this planet that takes the poisonous carbon dioxide out of our breath and provides us with oxygen. Think about the water, the food, the clothing, the shelter, everything that you have, the microbiomes within our bodies that help us to digest and to live and to regulate our body functions. All of this is possible because, as Pope Francis reminds us, we are interdependent, interconnected. We are creation too. And we see the devastating consequences of our human-centered, anthropocentric behavior, where we've made ourselves the lords and ladies of creation, where we've sought to dominate the rest of creation. And, the problem with this is it affects us as human beings, but affects all of creation too. And if you are pro-life, if you are for life, then you have to be for all life. And it begins and it's protected and is made possible by this planet on which we all live and share our common home. So remember to take that to the ballot box. It's so important.
Whoa, is it ever important? Thank you so much, Brother Dan. Thank you for weaving it together. And I have to say, part of my prayer practice is breathing, but I'm going to think of that really differently about the integration and my gratitude for all the algae that made it possible. Thank you for expanding our awareness. All right, now I am so excited to introduce another friend of mine, Sister Joan Chittister, a Benedictine sister, who has, I don't know, I understand from Wikipedia, over 50 books and a gabillion articles. But for me, what's really important is that she often speaks my heart with a courage that I haven't had. She is able to put out so beautifully, so clearly, the important decisions or the important questions of our time. And the other piece I love about her is she does carry a sense of humor, boldness of thought, and a monastic sense of constant prayer, which are more signs of holiness that Pope Francis talks about in his exhortation on holiness. So I feel like we're really blessed to welcome you, Sister Joan Chittister, to our midst to share with us your perspective of the courage it takes to be a multi-issue voter. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you, Simone. When I hear you all say anything like that, I only remember my father. It takes one to know one. So I appreciate the company and the support. I want to move very quickly tonight through the 4 dimensions of this question that I think are leading not just to confusion, though there's plenty of that, but to a deep, deep moral contradiction. So I'm going to be fast, and maybe some of it can come up later. The confusion I wanted to expose a bit is the confusion about the words of the church. If they are unfortunate, I forgive them. If they are tactical, I will indeed call them out over and over and over again. By what do I mean by that? This whole notion that the Catholic Church itself has said that abortion is the only thing that matters. This is the big one, and of course, the innocent bystander says, of course, the Catholic Church says that it's about sex, and they can't handle this. No, on the contrary, every word of that is wrong. How many people really know that then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, over 20 years ago, as the keeper of the speaking of the faith, wrote that it is of course possible to vote for a pro-choice candidate as long as you don't vote for them because they are pro-choice. And because you do not have a proportionate reason. We'll be back to that one in a minute. Think now of the people among us, the church members and leaders among us who are standing up one after another in the path of Joseph Ratzinger, Bishop McElroy from San Diego, a moral theologian, Bishop Mark Seitz from El Paso, who writes, single issue voting has corrupted Christian political witness. Bishop Stowe from Lexington, Kentucky, who says, we see what withdrawing from international treaties and protection of the environment does to life. Let's look then at the major questions that the confusion revolves around. Can we overlook, are we saying as Catholics that we can simply overlook any other moral wrong if the candidate assures us that they will not sanction abortion? Is that what we're saying? Anybody can do anything just as long as we get promised in the church door that when I'm in office, when I'm president, when I'm this, that, or the mayor of nowhere, I promise you I'll be opposed to abortion. And so the path lines up. Or the second question, what does that say then about our commitment as Christians to the other faith principles that are put in question as a result? What Dan is just talking about, creation, what Simone spoke so beautifully about, the manner of life everywhere, that people are living in degraded levels of it. poverty that's killing whole parts of the world, inequality, lack of health care. We must ask, the church tells us, where will our vote make the most impact for the preservation and development of all life? When you hear Helen talk about this reintroduction of capital punishment after 17 years, because one man is telling us, apparently on the brink and the cusp of an election, that law is the only factor. The church has never taught that. Law is not the only factor anywhere, nor has our very fine judicial system ever taught that. We know that motives and purpose and attitude and disposition and degree of malice determine what is in us that is indeed pro-life. Vatican II said, look at the signs of the times. What are they now? Racism, immigration, environmental justice. And we're sitting around in our parishes saying we're holy because we have published an anti-abortion story? Or the third question, which candidate is most capable of leading us through the signs of the times, through racism, through love for and care for the immigrants, through our environmental injustice that we have only recently returned to again? The single issue voter says one moral statement and one moral statement only. Nothing else matters. The single issue voter stands in every church doorway and says nothing else matters. War doesn't matter. Social Security for the elderly doesn't matter. Dishonesty doesn't matter. Lack of charity doesn't matter as long as you claim to be anti-abortion. Now, Simone has taken you through that door very beautifully. Do you know how to keep the seat of a senator, a president, or a representative safe? Go to your Catholic population and tell them that you're opposed to abortion. And you can tell them that every four years, because they'll still be there. And so will you. They will promise to eradicate racism, or they'll simply deny the problem of racism, or they will advance policies that perpetuate racism. And you know who's making that happen? You and me, because we're good Catholics. And we got that first contorted statement from the church, and they made hay with it. We've also introduced the notion, but it's an important concept if you state it as a voting concept. The fact of the matter is that there are other ways to address the issue of pro-life by doing something to affirm it, by telling ICE at the border that the cages have to go, telling the trackers at the border that they have to find those parents. That's the affirmation of the right to life for a born child who now has no home to grow up in. And the second way is to reduce abortion, as Simone said so beautifully, by reducing its root cause. The need for health care that a woman cannot afford, the need for child care that this entire corporate world of ours says is a woman's problem. They said that a secretarial pool was a man's problem, a vacation was a man's problem, the need for the golf course behind the GE, that was a man's problem. But when women go in and say, we need childcare in the basement, they say, that's not our problem. That has nothing to do with your work. They eliminate the root causes and then wonder why she went out and had an abortion. The fourth dimension are the implications for politics if Catholics can't clear up this issue. Voters can be held hostage to one party. voters will begin to make one party the idolatry of our time. From 2001 to 2007, the Republicans had the presidency, the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court, and they did absolutely nothing to eliminate Roe versus Wade. Why? Because single issue voters embedded them in the party and then began to make the party the idol of their lives, while Democrats were out, as Simone said again so well, fighting for health care, for child care, to lower medical costs, to give women an equal wage, and Social Security for big families. Finally, we have to look at not just the confusion, but the phenomenal moral contradiction that is being carried out in the name of goodness. How many times has it ever occurred to you that abortion is the absolutely only life issue that the church has ever come narrow to absolutizing? Let me give you an example. When men have all of life in their hands, men are burdened by no absolutes at all. They are told by all their male theology and their male politics and their male laws. Men can kill to defend the state. Ask Helen. They can kill to defend the self. They can kill to defend their friends, their family, and others. They can kill to punish, and they have often punished people who didn't do what they killed them for. And they can kill for the state, and they call it patriotism in that language. But when women have any control over life at all, as they have control of all the life in their body, women never, ever, ever are considered moral. They're always mortally wrong. They are mortally damned. They are mortally degreed. What does that lead us to? It says, to label something pro-choice doesn't mean that a person stands for all things contributing to life. And it also means then your highest authority is not these documents or anybody's political party. Your highest authority is conscience. Mae West said one day, nobody considers Mae West their saint and in hiding, but I do. Mae West said, you only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough.
Yay! Yay! Sister Joan, fabulous. So important, that piece about conscience, because the whole trust in a woman to make the moral choice gets so lost in this conversation. Thank you so much, and for integrating the issues of supporting all of life and the dignity of women. And quite frankly, the idea that childcare is a woman's issue, doesn't that just set your hair on fire? That one is like. I think the pandemic may be helping with us with that. I hope. Men waking up, I hope. All right, now we get to bring back our panelists, and we're going to have just a few minutes for conversation. So we've all talked about the issues of life and the grounding right now in crisis. And I'm curious, can we just talk for a bit about what is it going to take to heal our nation, to really be the nation that we aspire to be, to hold up the value and the dignity, the importance of everyone. And we can just do kind of round robin, just kind of chat. That's my goal here. So what do we do? How do we act?
I think one of the problems with the question, Simone, is that for at least the last 15 to 20 years, we have not been building national community. Partisanship has managed to divide us in the worst possible way. And so we are now under the authority of a government that is ruling by a 1 to 2 vote majority. You cannot make community out of that unless you expose it, unless you pull away the underpinnings that are making community impossible.
Whoa. Good point. Helen, go for it. Unmute yourself, though. There you go.
First, I got to say how good it is, Joan, to hear your voice. So good to be in the virtual room with you. I don't know about virtuous, but virtuous. I mean, who else is going to quote Mae West, okay? Like I was Snow White, but I drifted. But this is good. This is good. We're mixing it up in the conversation. I got to just say, one of the things I've learned is that when we are separated from each other and made to be afraid of each other, we can do anything to each other. I've learned this in the death penalty, that people who have committed murder, they were just told to be so evil in their character and what they had done. We couldn't even put them in prison because they'd kill other inmates or other guards, that we had to kill them. So make us afraid of each other, separate us from each other. And more I've been thinking of this saying from Latin America: what the eyes don't see, the heart can't feel. So with the death penalty issue, I've just been getting out to the people. The people are good. They just need to be given a chance to get close to these issues so that then they can have a compassionate response. So when you absolutize something and say any woman who has an abortion is evil, and you don't look at it in the context, why would people? Archbishop Tutu said one time, what would make a man who's the father of a family strap a bomb to his back and get on a bus and blow people up? What is going on in that man's life that would make him act so desperately? And it's only when we look at, in the context of compassion of life, that we can look at the abortion question, that we look at the death penalty, that we look at the scandal that we still have 40 million people plus in this country in poverty. We have to do just what we're doing here, is to keep getting with each other to talk about these things, to open them up so that we can have contact and compassion with each other. So I'm really happy to be a part of this. Dan, you were great too. Melissa, everybody. It's just great to be a part of it.
Okay, but I'm going to go to Dan and Melissa because, okay, we're talking about building community, getting connected, building something new. And I think that's such an important insight, that we've been torn apart. And fear, I think what you're touching, Helen, this fear of each other, that we've got to be afraid, that is destroying the connection. And it is not the Christian way. I'm curious, Dan and Melissa, okay, you circulate with a younger demographic than me. And so I'm curious, do you see signs that there is an awareness of community, a building of community among younger folks? Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah. As someone who identifies as like the borderline between millennial and Gen Z, I think what aggravates me is when people say, oh, young folks are leaving the church, and it's because they don't care. So that phrase for me, that doesn't give an avenue to community. But what I think does is, young folks are leaving the church. Did we ask why? And when they answered, did we take it seriously? Because reconciliation doesn't happen without authentic healing, right? And authentic, I hear you, I'm listening. Oh, crap, I did something wrong and I'm sorry, right? When someone says, you've hurt my feelings, your actions have hurt me, if you say, no, they didn't, I think it's hard to have a community, right? So if you have young people, my friends, myself, saying, I want desperately to be Catholic because it means something. It means to believe in something higher. And also, I identify as brown. I identify as Black. I identify as LGBTQ+. My parents got divorced and the church didn't welcome me. I go to a predominantly white Catholic school and no one takes seriously my complaints about racism. And when we say these things, right, when we look at like just the fact that white Catholics and Latino Catholics vote very differently, and we voice these things, we say we don't feel welcome in our own church, and people say, well, that's just not true, or racism isn't real, or we'll just pray, or, if you would just listen to us. That doesn't give a way for us to heal, to become, authentically together. And I think so often as Catholics, we want to romanticize, we need to unite, just overcome differences. And what that translates as to me sometimes is shut up. You're causing a rift. And now we're going to have to think about these things. And it would be so much easier if we didn't. Right. So I think my fellow Catholics are vocally Catholic, and also they are trying to make a community that looks a lot different sometimes than the ones that either raised us or taught us. And it's not out of, bitterness or vain, but a true place of hurt and, trying to respond to the signs of the times while holding truth to faith. So.
Whoa. Can I just touch on that for a second? Then we'll go to you, Brother Dan. But that piece about letting our hearts be broken open by the truth of the pain, I think is critically important. And when we look at the gospel, that's exactly what Jesus did every time. He walked towards the one and said, well, what do you need? What's going on? Talk to me. And I thank you for lifting that up, Melissa. I think that's critically important.
Thank you.
Brother Dan, a bit of wisdom.
Yeah. So it's amen to everything that's been said. And, I want to pick up on something Melissa just said. I guess technically, especially in religious life, I'm on the younger side of things, though. I'm not getting any younger. It's amazing how life works that way. But I'll tell you, one of the things that really inspires me about young Catholics came 2 years ago in preparation for the Synod on Young Adults, which I think didn't go the way it really ought to have gone. I think the Holy Spirit was interrupted, but where the Holy Spirit really moved was in March of 2018, when 300 young people from all around the globe got together, and the document that they drafted as their kind of statement to the church leaders, again, a bunch of old men, mostly old white men, was very, very bold. It was courageous. It was truthful. And it speaks to a lot of the things that Melissa just said, that young Catholics in particular, they're not, quote, leaving the church because there isn't a guitar mass or there isn't this kind of outreach or this kind of youth group. They're leaving because they're not being taken seriously. And because they're, I think, more and more connected, as we see, especially with younger generations in the US context. They don't believe the BS about guns. You see this with the students down in Florida after the horrific series of school shootings that have happened over and over again. They believe seriously about the consequences of global climate change. They believe seriously the reality of systemic racism. They believe, and they say in this document, that the church and the world have a problem with the way that women are treated and presented and excluded. So amen to what Sister Joan was saying earlier, and I think Melissa's spot on. I encourage folks to go check that document out. It's the March document from 2018. I'll just add two other quick things, picking up on something Sister Helen said that just rings so true to me, is, that saying about what the eyes don't see, the heart can't love or can't feel. It reminds me of one of the problems I recognize in our country today, which is that everything may be made worse by social media, although us all coming together is made better, I believe. But I think we've slipped into viewing one another as abstractions, and I think everyone this evening has spoken to this, whether it's, a woman who is discerning how to, carry a child and the need she might have, or the decisions that families make or young people make, and all this kind of stuff. These are not abstractions. These are real people's lives with real histories and real context and real struggles. And I think we've forgotten that. And the more we can remember that we're people, that we're humans, that we're connected to one another, which brings me to my last point that I want to just reemphasize, that's been echoed all night in my eyes, which is something that Pope Francis points to in this latest encyclical, even though the title is a bit exclusive. And that is essentially that we are all related to one another. We are sisters and we are brothers to each other, and we don't act like it. And I can't help but think of, St. Francis and St. Clare of Assisi, who preferred this term brother and sister, and they meant it, not just to their family, biological family, or family of choice, but to everybody, every stranger, every person they met or person they wouldn't meet. In fact, all of God's creatures. And I think if we take that seriously, then we can start to rebuild relationship, because then we have a commitment that's rooted in our kind of inherent familial relationships, rather than reducing each other to ideas, boxes, and abstractions.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Amen, brother.
Yeah, boxes, Zoom boxes. That's how I've been living this bus trip, has been in a Zoom box. But I want to, I know we've run out of time. This is just so exciting to be together. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I want to end with Pope Francis in the new encyclical talks about a politics of encounter. And I really think that goes to the place where we can connect. We can get back together, because encounter means, for me, means dealing with what you were talking about, Melissa. It means, Brother Dan, addressing our relationships, the truth of our relationships. And I just want to end and then do a blessing as we head out, but end with the story of the Tias and Abuelas, the angry Tias and Abuelas, this organization that we visited down in McAllen, Texas. These women, aunts and grandmothers, just started showing up to care for the immigrant folks that were being discharged in the early days of the Trump administration. They would be discharged with no care, no concern, just into the streets. And they showed up to respond to need. That's all they did, was show up to respond to need. And it's that quality of showing up. And now they've created all these relationships. They've got all these connections. They have a cousin organization down in Brownsville doing the same thing now. But their big worry is that the people that they connect with are stuck on the other side of the border, subject to the drug cartels, to violence, to no food, waiting for a date to have their hearing. And their anger and their anguish, the two A's, I think are what maybe need to mobilize us, energize us, and get us moving to make change. Because it is in community that this will happen. So, thank you for tonight. But let us bless each other as we go forth, knowing that it's by connecting, by listening, by asking the question, what's going on, and listening to the answers, believing what we hear and looking for the deeper story, understanding the fact that structural racism is alive in our nation but can be rooted out if we address it. That the discrimination against women is alive in our nation but can be rooted out if we engage it. That our fear of each other can be ended if we walk towards each other, carrying a bit of joy, a passion for justice, a willingness to risk, and living in constant prayer. And that constant prayer in this season for me is help together. Help. Let us make our nation, our world, a better place. And for all this, we pray, go forth, spread the word, be bold, don't commit a sin of silence. Let's let that be over. We can do this. All right. Good night. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sister Joan, Sister Helen, Melissa, Brother Dan. What a great conversation. You've made my heart so happy. Thank you.